All right, my English teacher friends, it's Christian Kuhn coming at you again, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of Composition. And I have a brief video for you today where I'm going to highlight my thesis template for the purposes of performing literary analysis. And as many of you know, I like to use a wide array of literature in my classes. And for this, we're going to focus on an Oscar-nominated short film called The Raisin by Rob Carter. So to find this video, you can go right on YouTube and just type in The Raisin, Rob Carter, and it's right there for you. It's about 12 minutes long, fantastic piece, and as I said in the description, it's great fodder to teach extended metaphor and all various forms of irony. It's a fantastic piece for that. So let's jump right in. Let's ask ourselves the question, how do I write the introductory paragraph? And for those of you that are familiar with my work, you know that for literary analysis, you can always invert the thesis. So I'm going to highlight how to use my inverted thesis template for this. So specifically for AP literature teachers, my students only use the inverted thesis template for all three FRQs, and I know several of you are not AP teachers, you're just on-level teachers. Same thing, whenever my students are doing literary analysis, no matter the grade level, no matter the genre, we always employ or manipulate the inverted thesis template. So before I dive into this, what we're going to do is this. I'm going to talk about a basic philosophy that I have with regards to the teaching of composition. I always tell teachers when I work with them through the National Writing Project or when I'm doing professional development with districts, that you got to Bob Ross your instruction. What you're going to see are 3 student exemplars that my kids wrote based on my writing. And what I mean by Bob Ross your instruction is this. Get to the proverbial easel, get to the proverbial canvas, and illustrate for your students how to do this. Position yourself as the expert writer in the classroom and paint with your kids. So what I did was I used a video called by Steve Cutts called Happiness, and I wrote 3 inverted models using Steve Cutts' Happiness, and then we watched The Raisin. It cuts down the mimicry. Kids aren't stealing my thunder; they're not stealing my ideas, but just to model how to do it, I used a different video, and that's what I mean by Bob Rossing your instruction. So a couple of cheat codes, couple of hacks that I want to talk about. With all literary analysis prompts, you basically have 2 questions implicit in every prompt. And this is especially true of the AP literature exam for FRQ1 and FRQ2. So implicit in the prompt are the 2 questions: what is the author's intent and how does the author construct meaning? My contention is this. If students accurately answer both of those questions, all day long they're going to get the thesis point, whether it be an on-level class or an AP level class. So what is the author's intent and how does the author construct meaning? So when we're talking about inverted thesis, here's what's going to happen. You end with the thesis. And when the student answers the question, how does the author construct meaning? That comprises the thesis. So in the inverted model, the last sentence of the 4, you got to keep in mind that my thesis templates are always 4 sentences long. The 4th sentence is going to answer the question, how does the author construct meaning? So that is the thesis statement. The first 3 sentences are going to be with regards to authorial intent. So there's going to be a couple of things that happen within this template. So 3 sentences authorial intent, 1 sentence construction of meaning. And then my students do a few things from my academies that I run. One is Tier 2 level vocabulary. Throughout the course of the academic year, I run intensive word study academies. I have hundreds of exercises and activities that help students really augment their vocabulary exponentially over the course of the academic year. So you'll see my students cop a nice academic tone in their piece without being overly goonish or pedantic or contrived. It is a teeter-totter balance. I disabuse my students of the idea that using $1 million words is the equivalent of good writing, but just a tad enough to sound really academic and sophisticated. The other thing you'll see my students do is bust out some syntactical variation at sentence level. I use a book called Strunk and White's Write It Right. And in that book, they espouse the idea that there's 12 different ways to cobble together a single sentence. They call that rule number 18. So check out my students' voice, rhythm, and flow in this. I want them not to parallel their sentences because that tends to yield a da-dot, da-dot, da-dot kind of tone, a droning rhythm that usually is indicative of a struggling or emerging writer. So they're going to have nice, flowy, supple sentences going on here. And as I've already alluded to, it's going to be exactly 4 sentences long. All right, so just to recap here, we're going to be looking for 3 plus 1. 3 authorial intent, 1 construction of meaning. I'm going to show you 3 times. So here is student number 1. And I'll just read it and then I'll break it down for you. And I've color-coded it for you too to really nicely elucidate how to piece this all together. So here's student number 1. So often in life, people will close themselves off from the world. This common distrust that plagues our society only sows needless interpersonal strife and conflict, hurting all who participate in it. Anger and isolationism makes the world much worse off, and it can be hard to open oneself to others. Carter's manipulation of the extended metaphor of the raisin and 3 forms of irony portray this point and represents the challenges of solitude and distrust. All right, so let me break this down. So the first 3 sentences I've highlighted in red. A lot of teachers refer to this as universal truth, universal theme, the exigence. So it's the encapsulation of why did Rob Carter make this film? What's his thesis, right? So you're going to express that in 3 sentences, and that's the context and background of the template. So this student did a nice job of just really hammering home the universal truthiness of Rob Carter's intent as a director. The last sentence gets at the construction of meaning. And in green, I highlighted the terms, the devices, the techniques the students use to identify the construction of meaning. And my advice always is this: focus on the 1 or 2 most salient moves that the author makes. And in this case, the student is contending that the metaphors and the ironies, the 3 various ironies, are the absolute essential thing, the criteria of analysis in this. So you can see there, it's a perfect 3 plus 1. In terms of academic diction, the tier 2, I've highlighted those words in black for you. So again, you don't want to overdo it, but it sounds just academic enough to, I think, out of the gate, if we're at, talking in terms of College Board AP level, any AP reader would say this kid's probably in contention for the sophistication point if they can sustain this for the duration of the paper. So out of the gate, very good. And as always, it's exactly 4 sentences long. All right, that might be a little confounding just seeing it once. So let's do that all over again and have student number 2 step to the plate and crank an intro for us with the inverted thesis template. I've used the same color coding system for this one, and I'll break it down from the top. So here it is. The process of opening oneself up to the world can prove to be a long and painful process, especially for those who play victim to the underpinnings of their subconscious pullings. Often, one remains stuck in their ways, especially if they lack a propensity towards self-reflection. To let any single person into that bubble of isolation can potentially lead one to abandon their value system and deeply rooted convictions. In Carter's short film, the magnitude of the old man's warped perception is amplified by the wide open desolate setting and the extended metaphor of the raisins act as a catalyst to demonstrate the lengths one will go to uphold their myopic worldviews. So it's the exact same thing here, 3 plus 1. This student's got a tad better writing chops than student number 1, a little bit more sophistication. But you can see that those first 3 sentences get to the universal truth, the universal theme, the author's thesis, the exigence, however you want to call it. I just refer to it as authorial intent. The last sentence is doing exactly what exemplar number 1 did. The construction of meaning, and I highlighted in green here, this student is focusing on the setting and the extended metaphor. I underlined in black, or highlighted in black, all the tier 2. This one has a tad bit more. I think one of the setbacks of this student is they tend to be a little bit too wordy. They're very verbose, and I don't want them to get hung up in all the big verbiage, but out of the gate, this is done very well. And I think this is a good model to demonstrate how to do that 3 plus 1 inverted paradigm. So very well done, and it's exactly 4 sentences, just like the others. So students that are watching this, yes, you can do this. This is not very hard. So my students have been with me for a whole academic year at this stage of the game. So they're a well-oiled machine. So let's see it a third time and just take a look at a very basic, very simple approach to this. Again, we're going to go 3 plus 1. We're going to sprinkle in some tier 2. We're going to alter our sentence constructs so that we have good voice rhythm and flow. We're going to go 3 sentences authorial intent, 1 sentence construction of meaning. So here it is from the top. Experiencing lying, manipulation, and gaslighting can absolutely tear down a person's perspective on trust. And at the subconscious level, one's myopic hub can allow their past to destroy their future unknowingly. Further, one must remember that man is a social animal and by default withers his own sense of humanity in cases of extreme isolation. So we're at the last sentence here. So look how you use the terms, the devices, the techniques. Again, focus on the salient ones. Don't make it a terms dumping ground. Rob Carter highlights this phenomenon through a series of interlacing ironies and through the extended metaphor of the raisins. Again, same paradigm. 3 sentences, authorial intent up top. Sprinkle in some tier 2. Focus on those sentence constructs. Last sentence, they focus on metaphor and irony. And that's it, 3 plus 1. One of the things I really didn't focus on too much in this was the explanation of the sentence constructs. One of my pieces of advice for my students is this. You probably don't want to be paralleling your syntax in the introduction. There's really no need for that. So I tell my students, if you use one of the 12 sentence constructs, change it in the next sentence, right? Just don't parallel. Otherwise, you get that droning, robotic rhythm of an emerging, struggling writer. All right. So if you're writing with me, probably a good place to pause. Teacher, maybe you model a few more for your students, and students have at it. Have a writing workshop. Show each other your work. I'm a firm believer that the more writing you see, the better off you are going to be. So give your hand at this. So, all right, we are at the end here. If you have any suggestions, questions, comments, concerns, or just want to let me know how this flew in your class, feel free to reach out at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. Also know that I'm a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, and all throughout the calendar year, we offer PD sessions. And if you would like to know more about those, you can visit my website at www.teachingwritingcoach.com. In the banner, you'll see a link that says My NWP Courses. And like I said, we got stuff going on all year. We even have a self-paced course for those that have time constraints. I do a lot of travel. So if you want me to make a guest appearance at your school and host a PD for your department or for select teachers, I'm also more than willing to do that. And there's information on my website, www.teachingwritingcoach.com. So for now, happy teaching, happy writing, my friends. And I hope this serves you well and that you crush your thesis every single time. Be well.